The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars like a metal city. Its walls stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. Lights flickered across its surface like stars in the night sky. Inside this giant structure, the most important meeting in the galaxy was about to begin. Ambassador Veltar walked through the long corridors with heavy steps. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights. His forearms carried data tablets filled with information about a new species. The hegemony had sent him to present this information to the Galactic Council. He was not happy about his assignment. The council chamber was enormous. Seats rose in circles around a central platform. Each seat was designed for different types of beings. Some had water tanks for aquatic species. Others had special atmosphere controls for beings that breathed different gases. Today, most of the seats were empty. Veltar looked around the chamber with disgust. Only about 50 representatives had bothered to show up. The Altarians sat in their energy field chairs, their crystal bodies glowing softly. A few Corvani floated in their gravity bubbles, their tentacles moving slowly through the air. Some Zelenites stood at their posts, their tall bodies covered in metallic scales that reflected the chamber lights. The council will now hear the presentation about species candidate 848, announced the central computer in a voice that echoed through the chamber. Veltar stepped onto the platform. A holographic display appeared above his head, showing a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. The planet looked unremarkable compared to the massive worlds and artificial constructs that most council species called home. Honored council members, Veltar began, his voice carrying clear distaste. I present to you the third planet of the Sol system. The dominant species calls their world Earth. They call themselves humans. The hologram changed to show images of human cities, vehicles, and people going about their daily lives. Some council members looked up from their personal devices with mild interest. Most continued to ignore the presentation. The species is bipedal, Veltar continued. They stand approximately 6 feet tall on average. Their bodies are soft and weak compared to most galactic species. They have no natural armor, no ability to breathe different atmospheres, and no resistance to radiation. An Altarian representative spoke up, her crystal body chiming like bells. What is their lifespan, Ambassador? Approximately 80 years, Veltar replied. Silence filled the chamber. Then several beings began to laugh. 80 years was barely a moment to species that lived for thousands or tens of thousands of years. Surely you jest, said a Corvani, his tentacles waving with amusement. 80 years? Our children live longer than that. Veltar nodded grimly. It gets worse. Their technology is primitive. They still burn fossil fuels for energy. Their fastest ships barely reach 1% of light speed. They have only recently developed basic nuclear weapons and have never even left their own solar system. The hologram showed human rockets struggling to escape Earth's gravity, compared to the instant faster-than-light travel that council species took for granted. Human space technology looked like children playing with toys. What about their culture? Asked a Zelenite representative. Do they show potential for growth? Veltar's expression grew even darker. This is perhaps their most disturbing trait. Humans are incredibly violent. They have spent their entire recorded history fighting wars against each other. They have developed thousands of ways to kill other humans. They even fight wars over different beliefs about invisible beings they worship. The hologram displayed scenes of human conflicts throughout history, ancient battles with swords and spears, world wars with massive armies, modern conflicts with advanced weapons. The council members watched with growing disgust. They cannot even agree among themselves, Veltar continued. Their planet is divided into nearly 200 separate political groups called nations. These nations constantly argue, threaten each other, and sometimes go to war. They have multiple languages, religions, and cultural systems that often conflict. A young Altarian who had never seen such behavior asked, but surely they must have some redeeming qualities. Some reason we should consider them for council membership? Veltar paused to check his data tablet. They do show curiosity about space. Some of their scientists have made basic discoveries about physics and astronomy. They also show remarkable creativity in art and literature. However, these positive traits are far outweighed by their violent nature and primitive development. The chamber fell quiet as council members processed this information. Most advanced species had evolved past warfare millions of years ago. The idea of beings still fighting each other was almost impossible for them to understand. During this time, 3 humans sat in a small observation area reserved for candidate species. Dr. Sarah Chen, a brilliant scientist with gray hair and kind eyes, listened carefully to every word. Next to her sat Admiral Marcus Torres, a military officer with scars on his weathered face that told stories of human conflicts. The third human was Ambassador Janet Morrison, a diplomat chosen to represent Earth to the galaxy. Dr. Chen whispered to her companions. "They think we're primitive savages." Admiral Torres grinned, showing teeth that had been broken and repaired more than once. "Let them think that. Might be useful someday." Ambassador Morrison elbowed both of them to be quiet. She understood that this presentation would determine humanity's future relationship with the galaxy. Veltar was wrapping up his presentation. Based on all available data, the hegemony recommends granting this species observer status only. This is the lowest classification we can offer. It allows them to watch council proceedings but gives them no voting rights and no access to advanced technology. Several council members nodded in agreement. Observer status was usually given to species that might evolve into something useful in a few million years. It was essentially a polite way of saying, "Come back when you grow up." "Does anyone object to this recommendation?" asked the central computer. The chamber remained silent. No one saw any reason to waste time discussing such an obvious decision. Very well. The motion passes unanimously. Species 848, designated as humans of Earth, is granted observer status. They may attend council sessions but may not participate in votes or decision-making. This status will be reviewed in 50,000 years. The 3 humans were escorted to the platform. Ambassador Morrison stepped forward and bowed politely to the council. "Honored representatives," she said in clear, simple words that the translation system could easily handle. "We thank the Galactic Council for this opportunity. We understand that we are new to galactic civilization and have much to learn. We promise to observe quietly and learn from your wisdom." Her gracious acceptance surprised some council members. They had expected the humans to be angry or to argue for better treatment. Instead, the humans seemed genuinely grateful for any recognition at all. Veltar looked relieved that the humans were not causing trouble. Observer status grants you access to basic council records and allows you to attend public sessions. You will be provided with quarters on Nexus Prime and translation equipment. Do you have any questions? Dr. Chen raised her hand politely. "We would be very interested in learning about the different technologies and cultures represented in the council. Would it be possible to access historical records and scientific databases?" "Basic historical records are available to all observer species," Veltar replied. "However, advanced scientific information is restricted to full council members only." "We understand," said Admiral Torres. "We appreciate whatever you can share with us." As the humans were led away to their new quarters, the council members began to disperse. Most had already forgotten about the new species. The Altarians discussed trade agreements among themselves. The Corvani planned their next exploration missions. The Zelenites reviewed military exercises. None of them noticed the way Dr. Chen's eyes had lit up when she heard about historical records. None of them saw Admiral Torres mentally recording the layout of the station and the positions of security checkpoints. None of them paid attention to Ambassador Morrison, carefully noting which species seemed friendly and which seemed hostile. In the official council records, a simple entry was made. Species 848, humans. Status observer. Notes: primitive bipedal species with short lifespan and violent tendencies. Limited technological development. Unlikely to contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. Recommend reassessment in 50,000 years. The council members went about their normal business, confident that they had correctly assessed another minor species. They had no way of knowing that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Far away on Earth, news of the successful contact spread around the world. Humans celebrated their first step into galactic civilization. They did not know they had been classified as barely worth noticing. They did not know that most of the galaxy saw them as primitive and unimportant. But soon, very soon, the galaxy would learn what humans were really capable of. And the Galactic Council would never underestimate anyone ever again. 6 months had passed since humanity received observer status in the Galactic Council. Dr. Sarah Chen had spent every day in the vast libraries of Nexus Prime, reading about galactic history and technology. Admiral Torres had quietly mapped every corridor and security system he could access. Ambassador Morrison had made friends with representatives from dozens of species. Life on the massive space station had become routine for the three humans. They attended council sessions, learned about different cultures, and sent regular reports back to Earth. Most council members had forgotten they existed. The humans seemed content to watch and learn, just as observer species were supposed to do. Then everything changed. The first alarm sounded at 0347 station time. Red lights flashed through the corridors of Nexus Prime. The emergency broadcast system activated, sending urgent messages to every species in the galaxy. All council members report to emergency session immediately. Priority Alpha alert. This is not a drill. Dr. Chen rushed from her quarters toward the council chamber. In the corridors, she saw aliens running in panic. The usually calm Altarians were moving faster than she had ever seen them. Corvani were floating rapidly through the halls, their tentacles writhing with stress. Even the mighty Zelenites looked worried. The council chamber filled quickly. For the first time since the humans had arrived, every seat was occupied. Representatives from all 847 member species had answered the emergency call. The air buzzed with worried conversations in hundreds of different languages. Ambassador Veltar stood at the central platform, but his usual arrogance had been replaced by visible fear. His blue skin had turned pale, and his forearms shook as he held data tablets. "Honored council members," he began, his voice cracking, "we have received confirmation of our worst fears. The Devourers have returned." Silence fell over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Even the humans, who had only read about the Devourers in historical records, felt the weight of that announcement. The holographic display showed a star system that should have contained 7 planets, 2 asteroid belts, and over 1 billion inhabitants. Instead, there was only empty space and a few chunks of cooling rock. The Kepler 4M42 system was consumed 3 days ago, Veltar continued. The entire Meridian civilization is gone. 5 billion beings, along with their planets, moons, and orbital cities. Everything has been stripped down to basic elements and converted into Devourer ships. The hologram changed to show grainy footage from a fleeing scout ship. Massive dark shapes moved through space like a swarm of metal insects. They surrounded planets and began tearing them apart, piece by piece. Within hours, thriving worlds became resource materials for more Devourer units. An elderly Altarian representative stood up, her crystal body flickering with distress. "Are we certain these are actual Devourers? The last confirmed sighting was over 2 million years ago. Most experts believed they had been destroyed or had moved beyond our galaxy. DNA analysis of debris confirms Devourer technology," Veltar replied. "The metal alloys, energy signatures, and construction methods all match historical records. There is no doubt. The ancient enemy has returned from dark space." Terror spread through the chamber. The Devourers were not just another hostile species. They were something far worse. Ancient records described them as mechanical beings with one single purpose: to consume everything in the universe and convert it into more Devourers. No one knew where they came from originally. They had appeared in the galaxy millions of years ago and begun systematically destroying entire civilizations. The greatest military powers in galactic history had barely managed to drive them away, and only after losing thousands of species and countless worlds. "What is our current military status?" asked a Corvani representative. Admiral Kethvar of the Zelenite Defense Force stood to answer. His metallic scales gleamed as he accessed combat reports on his personal display. "We have mobilized all available fleets. The hegemony has deployed their newest energy weapons. The Altarian shield fleet is moving to defensive positions. The Corvani molecular disruptors are being prepared for mass deployment." The humans listened carefully as military leaders discussed their preparations. Dr. Chen took notes on everything, even though she was not supposed to participate in military planning. Admiral Torres paid close attention to ship capabilities and weapon systems. Ambassador Morrison watched the faces of different species, seeing how each one reacted to the crisis. "Surely our technology has advanced significantly since the last Devourer War," said a young representative from the Outer Rim territories. "We have weapons now that did not exist 2 million years ago." Admiral Kethavar's expression was grim. "That is what we hoped. Our first engagement occurred yesterday in the beta sector. The results were not encouraging. The holographic display showed a battle between Zelonite warships and Devourer forces. The Zelonites had brought their most powerful weapons, energy cannons that could crack planets, shields that could deflect supernova blasts, and ships the size of moons. The Devourers tore through them like paper. Their technology has also advanced, Admiral Kethvar continued. The energy weapons we relied on to drive them away before are now ineffective. They seem to absorb our energy attacks and convert them into more power for their own systems. The chamber erupted in worried conversations. If the mighty Zelonite war fleets could not stop the Devourers, what hope did anyone else have? Over the next several hours, reports continued to arrive from across the galaxy. Each one brought worse news. The Altarian shield fleet had been destroyed. Their famous energy barriers had been turned against them somehow. The Corvani molecular disruptors had simply bounced off Devourer hulls without causing any damage. Species after species reported the same results. Every advanced weapon, every sophisticated defense system, every military strategy that had been developed over millions of years of galactic civilization proved useless against the returning enemy. Dr. Chen watched as panic spread through the council. These were the most advanced beings in the galaxy, and they were helpless. Their technology, which had seemed so impressive to humanity, was worthless against this ancient threat. We must consider evacuation procedures, suggested one representative. If we cannot stop them, perhaps we can flee to other galaxies. With what ships? Replied another. The Devourers are consuming our fleets faster than we can build them. Soon we will have no way to escape even if we wanted to. Ambassador Morrison leaned over to her human companions. Should we say something? Offer to help? Admiral Torres almost laughed. Help with what? We don't even have faster-than-light travel yet. What could we possibly do that these advanced civilizations cannot? Dr. Chen looked thoughtful. Maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe being primitive is an advantage. The emergency session continued for 18 hours. Representative after representative stood up to offer suggestions. Every idea was quickly shot down by military experts, who explained why it would not work against Devourer technology. Advanced energy weapons were absorbed and turned against the attackers. Sophisticated computer viruses could not penetrate Devourer systems. Even biological weapons were useless against mechanical enemies. Finally, in desperation, the Council began reaching out to every member species for ideas. No suggestion was too small or too primitive to consider. Even observer species were asked to contribute. When the request reached the human quarters, Dr. Chen immediately volunteered to help. She submitted a formal request to examine all available data about Devourer technology, battle reports from the recent engagements, and historical records from the last war. The Council approved her request without much thought. They were asking everyone for ideas, even species they considered primitive. No one expected the humans to contribute anything useful, but they had nothing to lose by sharing the information. Dr. Chen spent the next 72 hours reviewing everything. She studied Devourer ship designs, analyzed their battle tactics, and read every historical account of previous encounters. Admiral Torres helped by providing military analysis of the combat reports. Ambassador Morrison gathered additional information from her contacts among other species. What they discovered would change everything. The humans found something that all the advanced alien civilizations had missed. The Devourers were incredibly sophisticated and powerful, but they had one weakness that no one had noticed. They were predictable. Every Devourer attack followed the same pattern. They approached with overwhelming force, absorbed enemy energy weapons, and systematically dismantled resistance using superior technology. They had been using these same tactics for millions of years because they always worked, but they had never faced an enemy that fought dirty. I need to speak with the Council, Dr. Chen told her companions. I think we might be able to help after all. Admiral Torres looked at the data she had compiled. A slow smile spread across his scarred face. You know what? I think you might be right. These things have never fought humans before. Ambassador Morrison contacted Council officials and requested permission for Dr. Chen to address the emergency session. The request was approved within hours. The Council was so desperate for ideas that they were willing to listen to anyone. As Dr. Chen prepared her presentation, news arrived of another Devourer victory. 3 more star systems had fallen. The enemy was moving faster now, gaining momentum as they converted each doctor. Sarah Chen stood at the central platform of the council chamber, feeling very small among the hundreds of alien representatives. Every seat was filled. Desperate beings from across the galaxy had come to hear what the primitive human might have to say about stopping the Devourers. Ambassador Veltar introduced her with obvious reluctance. The council recognizes Dr. Sarah Chen of the human species. She has requested permission to share observations about the Devourer threat. Murmurs filled the chamber. Many representatives seemed surprised that an observer species would dare to speak during such a critical moment. Others looked hopeful, willing to listen to anyone who might have a solution. Dr. Chen activated the holographic display and began her presentation. Honored council members, I have spent the last 3 days studying every piece of data about the Devourers. I believe I have identified their primary weakness. The chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical aliens leaned forward to listen. The Devourers are incredibly advanced and powerful, Dr. Chen continued. But they have one critical flaw. They are completely predictable. Every attack they have made in the last 2 million years follows exactly the same pattern. The hologram showed battle recordings from both ancient and recent encounters. In every case, the Devourers used identical tactics: approach with overwhelming force, absorb enemy energy attacks, and systematically destroy resistance using superior technology. They expect their enemies to fight like civilized beings, Dr. Chen explained. They expect energy weapons, sophisticated defenses, and organized military formations. Their entire strategy is built around defeating advanced technology with even more advanced technology. An Altarian representative interrupted with a chiming voice. Dr. Chen, we appreciate your analysis, but how does this help us? We cannot make our weapons less advanced. We cannot fight them with primitive technology. Dr. Chen smiled. Actually, that is exactly what I'm suggesting. The chamber erupted in shocked conversations. The idea of using primitive weapons against the most advanced enemy in galactic history seemed insane. Admiral Torres stood up from the observer section. May I join Dr. Chen on the platform? I have military experience that might be relevant. After a moment of hesitation, the council granted permission. Torres walked to the platform with the confident stride of a soldier who had seen real combat. My name is Admiral Marcus Torres, he began. I have spent 40 years studying human warfare. Dr. Chen is right about the Devourers being predictable. But there is something else you need to understand about humans. The hologram changed to show scenes from human military history, ancient battles with swords and spears, naval combat with cannons and gunpowder, world wars with massive armies and devastating weapons. Humans have spent our entire existence trying to kill each other, Torres continued. We have developed thousands of different ways to fight wars. We have studied every possible strategy, from massive frontal assaults to guerrilla warfare to terrorism. We know how to fight dirty. A Corvani representative waved his tentacles dismissively. Admiral Torres, with respect, your species' violent history is well documented. But how can primitive weapons possibly affect enemies that absorb our most advanced energy systems? Torres grinned, showing teeth that had been broken in combat. Because they are not designed to absorb primitive weapons. Their shields and armor are built to handle energy attacks, not simple kinetic force. Dr. Chen brought up technical specifications of Devourer ships. Look at their defensive systems. Energy absorption fields, quantum barriers, molecular disruption screens. All of these are designed to counter advanced weapons. But what happens when you throw a rock at them? The aliens in the chamber looked confused. The concept of throwing rocks as a military strategy was completely foreign to civilizations that had moved beyond physical violence millions of years ago. A rock? Asked a young Zelenite. You mean an actual piece of stone? Exactly, Torres replied. Or better yet, a piece of metal moving at high speed. What humans call a kinetic weapon. We have been using them for thousands of years, from arrows and bullets to railguns and mass drivers. Ambassador Morrison joined them on the platform. The Admiral is proposing something that no galactic civilization has tried in millions of years. Fighting with crude, simple weapons that the Devourers have never encountered. The council members struggled to understand the concept. Their technology was so advanced that the idea of using primitive weapons seemed impossible. Many species had not fought physical wars for so long that they had forgotten such weapons ever existed. Dr. Chen continued the presentation. But kinetic weapons are only part of the solution. The real advantage humans have is our approach to warfare. We do not fight fair. We do not follow rules. We use deception, surprise attacks, and tactics that other species would consider dishonorable. She brought up examples from human military history. Guerrilla warfare tactics where small groups attacked larger armies and then disappeared. Suicide attacks where soldiers sacrificed themselves to achieve strategic goals. Psychological warfare designed to break enemy morale. The Devourers expect their enemies to fight like civilized beings, Dr. Chen explained. They expect organized fleets, direct confrontations, and predictable strategies. They have never faced an enemy that fights like humans do. Admiral Torres nodded in agreement. Humans fight to win, not to look honorable. We will use any tactic, any weapon, any strategy that gives us an advantage. The Devourers have never encountered an enemy that thinks like that. The chamber fell silent as the aliens processed this information. The concept of fighting dirty was so alien to most species that they struggled to understand what the humans were proposing. Finally, Admiral Kithvar of the Zelenite Defense Force spoke up. Are you seriously suggesting that we abandon millions of years of military evolution and fight with primitive weapons? Not abandon, Torres replied. Supplement. Use advanced technology where it works, but also use simple weapons where they might be more effective. Most importantly, change our entire approach to fighting. Dr. Chen brought up a detailed battle plan that she and Torres had developed. We call it Operation Chaos. The strategy is based on unpredictability, asymmetric warfare, and what humans call playing dirty. The plan was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Instead of massive fleet engagements, it called for small groups of ships carrying primitive weapons. Instead of direct confrontations, it relied on hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, and deception. You want us to hide explosives in space debris, said an Altarian representative, her crystal body flickering with confusion. You want to ram our ships into their vessels. You want to use nuclear weapons and chemical explosives. Yes, Torres replied simply, and suicide attacks, booby traps, false retreats, and any other tactic that might work. The goal is not to fight honorably. The goal is to win. The aliens looked horrified. Many species had evolved beyond such brutal concepts millions of years ago. The idea of deliberately crashing ships into enemies or hiding bombs in innocent-looking objects violated every principle of civilized warfare. But their civilized approach was not working. Advanced weapons had failed. Sophisticated strategies had been useless. Traditional military thinking had led only to defeat after defeat. This is barbaric, protested a representative from the Outer Rim. We cannot abandon everything that makes us civilized beings. Ambassador Morrison stepped forward. With respect, being civilized will not matter if the Devourers consume every living being in the galaxy. Sometimes survival requires doing things that seem wrong. The debate continued for hours. Some council members were intrigued by the human proposals. Others were disgusted by the suggestion that they should fight like primitive savages. Many were simply confused by military concepts that their species had not used for millions of years. Meanwhile, reports continued to arrive of more Devourer victories. The enemy was moving through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. Time was running out for debate and philosophical discussions. Finally, the hegemon himself spoke. As the leader of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, his words carried enormous weight. The human proposals violate every principle of civilized warfare, he said slowly. They are crude, brutal, and dishonorable. They represent everything that advanced civilizations have evolved beyond. The humans waited for him to reject their ideas and dismiss them from the chamber. However, the hegemon continued, our civilized approach has failed completely. Our advanced weapons are useless. Our sophisticated strategies have led only to defeat. Perhaps it is time to try something different. He paused and looked directly at Admiral Torres. Admiral, if we were to implement your Operation Chaos, what would you need from us? Torres straightened his shoulders. Ships that can carry kinetic weapons, nuclear warheads, chemical explosives, and commanders who are willing to fight like their lives depend on it. And crews who are willing to die if necessary, Dr. Chen added quietly. The chamber fell silent again. The concept of soldiers deliberately sacrificing their lives for strategic advantage was almost incomprehensible to species that valued individual life above all else. The combined fleet that assembled at Epsilon Sector looked nothing like any military force in galactic history. Instead of the sleek energy weapon ships that had dominated space warfare for millions of years, a ragtag collection of vessels prepared for the most unconventional battle ever fought. Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the retrofitted cargo ship, New Hope, watching the final preparations. Through the viewport, Zelenite warships had been stripped of their sophisticated energy weapons and loaded with simple nuclear warheads. Altarian crystal ships carried primitive chemical explosives. Even elegant Corvani vessels had been modified to launch chunks of metal at high speed. Status report. Torres called to his mixed-species crew. Commander Sarah Voss, a human tactical officer who had volunteered to serve under alien command, checked her instruments. All ships report ready, Admiral. Nuclear payloads are armed, kinetic launchers are loaded, chemical explosives are in position. Next to her, a nervous Altarian communications officer named Keth Moran struggled with concepts his species had not used for millions of years. Admiral Torres, I still do not understand the ramming maneuvers. You want our pilots to deliberately crash their ships into enemy vessels? Torres nodded grimly. When necessary, yes. The Devourers expect us to retreat when our ships are damaged. They do not expect us to use damaged ships as weapons. Dr. Sarah Chen worked at a science station, monitoring Devourer movements. Enemy fleet is approaching on schedule. Estimated time to contact 47 minutes. They are moving in standard formation just as predicted. The approaching Devourer force was massive. Hundreds of dark ships moved through space like mechanical sharks. Each vessel was the size of a city, covered in weapons and armor that had proven invulnerable to every advanced weapon the galaxy could deploy. But the humans had noticed something important. The Devourer ships were designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks. Their hulls were built to deflect molecular disruptors and quantum weapons. However, their defenses had gaps when it came to simple physical force. Remember, Torres announced over the fleet communications, these enemies have never fought humans before. They do not know our tactics. They expect us to behave like civilized beings. Today we show them what uncivilized looks like. The first phase of Operation Chaos began 20 minutes before the fleets made contact. Small human ships disguised as damaged vessels fleeing the battle zone drifted through the space between the two forces. They looked like harmless debris, the kind of wreckage that littered every battlefield. The Devourers ignored them completely. Their sensors were designed to track energy signatures in advanced weapons, not primitive chemical explosives hidden inside fake wreckage. As the Devourer fleet passed through the debris field, the hidden bombs exploded simultaneously. The blasts were not powerful enough to destroy the massive enemy ships, but they were not meant to. Instead, they created chaos and confusion, disrupting Devourer formations and sensor networks. Phase 1 complete, reported Commander Voss. Enemy formation is scattered. Proceeding to Phase 2. The second phase violated every principle of civilized warfare. Instead of engaging in organized fleet combat, small groups of council ships appeared from multiple directions, attacking random targets with primitive weapons. Zelenite vessels launched nuclear warheads like ancient artillery shells. The Devourers tried to absorb the energy from the explosions, but nuclear weapons produced heat, radiation, and kinetic force in ways their systems could not easily process. Altarian ships fired masses of metal debris at incredible speeds. The kinetic projectiles punched through Devourer hulls that had easily deflected energy weapons. Simple momentum and mass overcame defenses designed for sophisticated attacks. Corvani vessels used chemical explosives to create dense clouds of reactive gas around enemy ships. When the Devourers tried to absorb the energy from these clouds, the chemicals caused chain reactions that damaged their hull plating. This is impossible, transmitted a Devourer communication that Dr. Chen intercepted. Enemy weapons are too primitive for effective resistance. Our systems cannot process these attack patterns. But the real shock came when Commander Voss initiated the ramming attacks. The cargo ship, New Hope, had been loaded with every explosive device the humans could find. Nuclear warheads, chemical bombs, and kinetic penetrators filled its cargo holds. When Torres gave the signal, Voss piloted the ship directly toward the largest Devourer vessel. The Devourers had never encountered suicide attacks. Their logical systems could not understand why an enemy would deliberately destroy their own ship. They assumed the human vessel was damaged and trying to escape, so they ignored it until it was too late. The New Hope crashed into the Devourer command ship at full speed. The explosion that followed lit up the entire star system. Nuclear fire mixed with chemical reactions and kinetic force to create a blast that overwhelmed every Devourer defense system. The command ship, which had survived direct hits from planet-cracking energy weapons, was torn apart by primitive explosives and simple momentum. "Command ship destroyed," reported Dr. Chen, her voice filled with amazement. "The entire Devourer network is experiencing system failures. The loss of their command ship sent shockwaves through the Devourer fleet. Their interconnected consciousness, designed for perfect coordination and logical decision-making, could not process what had happened. They had lost their most powerful vessel to an attack method that violated every principle of logical warfare." In the confusion that followed, human-led strike teams launched the most audacious phase of Operation Chaos. Small ships carrying soldiers in simple spacesuits approached damaged Devourer vessels. Instead of using sophisticated boarding methods, they blew holes in the hulls with chemical explosives and crawled inside. The Devourers had no defense against such primitive tactics. Their internal security systems were designed to stop energy weapons and advanced technology, not beings with simple tools and chemical explosives. Human soldiers, along with volunteers from other species, moved through Devourer ships placing bombs in critical systems. They did not try to capture the vessels or study the technology. They simply destroyed everything they could reach and moved on to the next target. The Devourers could not understand this approach. Logical beings would try to capture and study advanced technology. Instead, the humans treated Devourer ships like obstacles to be removed rather than prizes to be won. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," announced Dr. Chen as the battle reached its climax. "Remaining Devourer vessels are withdrawing toward dark space." The Watching Council representatives could barely believe what they were seeing. The invincible enemy that had destroyed their most advanced fleets was running away from primitive weapons and crude tactics. Admiral Kethvar, observing from a command ship in the rear of the formation, transmitted to Torres, "Admiral, this is unprecedented. The Devourers have never retreated from any engagement in recorded history." Torres, standing on the bridge of a replacement ship after sacrificing the New Hope, smiled grimly. "They have never fought humans before. We do not follow their rules." The retreat became a rout as more Devourer ships fell to kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. Vessels that had seemed invulnerable proved vulnerable to simple physical attacks. Command structures that had operated flawlessly for millions of years broke down when faced with illogical human tactics. But the humans were not finished. As the Devourers fled, small human ships followed them, continuing to attack with hit-and-run tactics. They did not try to engage in formal pursuit or capture fleeing enemies. Instead, they harassed the retreating fleet like wolves chasing wounded prey. "This is not how warfare is supposed to function," transmitted another intercepted Devourer message. "Enemy tactics violate all logical parameters. We cannot predict or counter these methods." Dr. Chen monitored the enemy communications with fascination. They are actually confused. Their entire strategic system is based on logical responses to logical threats. They cannot adapt to irrational tactics. The final blow came when human engineers working with alien volunteers managed to board the largest remaining Devourer ship. Instead of trying to capture it intact, they planted nuclear charges throughout its hull and escaped in small pods. The explosion when that ship detonated created a chain reaction that damaged several other Devourer vessels. The sight of their flagship being destroyed by primitive explosives, carried by beings in simple spacesuits finally, broke the Devourer resolve completely. "All enemy vessels are withdrawing from the sector," reported Commander Voss. "They are returning to dark space at maximum speed." The combined fleet watched in stunned silence as the most feared enemy in galactic history fled from a battle they should have won easily. The Devourers, who had consumed entire civilizations without suffering significant losses, had been defeated by tactics so primitive that most species had forgotten they existed. Torres opened communications to all ships in the fleet. "Operation Chaos is complete. Enemy forces have been repelled. All vessels returned to base for debriefing." As the ships began their journey back to Council space, the aliens struggled to understand what they had witnessed. The most sophisticated military minds in the galaxy had been helpless against the Devourers. 3 days after the Battle of Epsilon Sector, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session once again. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Instead of panic and desperation, the chamber buzzed with excitement and disbelief. Every seat was filled. Representatives from all 847 member species had come to witness what many were calling the most important council meeting in galactic history. The beings who had dismissed humanity as primitive savages now looked at the three humans with expressions of awe, fear, and respect. Dr. Sarah Chen, Admiral Marcus Torres, and Ambassador Janet Morrison sat in the observer section, but they were no longer ignored. Aliens throughout the chamber kept glancing at them, whispering among themselves in hundreds of different languages. Ambassador Veltar stood at the central platform, but his usual arrogance had been completely replaced by nervous respect. His forearms shook slightly as he began to speak. Honored council members, we are gathered today to address the unprecedented events at Epsilon Sector. For the first time in recorded galactic history, the Devourers have been defeated in direct combat. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause that lasted for several minutes. Species that had been preparing for extinction just days earlier now celebrated their unexpected survival. When the noise finally died down, Veltar continued. The victory was achieved through tactics and strategies provided by the human representatives. Their unconventional approach proved effective where our most advanced military methods had failed. The holographic display showed highlights from the battle. Alien viewers watched in fascination as primitive kinetic weapons penetrated Devourer hulls. Chemical explosives that should have been useless against advanced armor created devastating damage. Simple ramming attacks destroyed ships that had resisted planet-cracking energy weapons. The after-action reports confirm what many of us witnessed firsthand. Veltar announced, "Human military doctrine is unlike anything in our recorded history. They approach warfare from perspectives that our strategic computers cannot even calculate." Admiral Kethvar of the Zelenite Defense Force took the platform to present the official military analysis. His metallic scales gleamed with excitement as he spoke. The humans introduced concepts that our military academies have not taught for millions of years. Suicide attacks, guerrilla warfare, asymmetric tactics, and what they call fighting dirty. These methods were so primitive that Devourer defense systems had no protocols for dealing with them. The analysis showed how each human tactic had exploited weaknesses in Devourer systems. Energy absorption fields could not process kinetic weapons. Quantum barriers were useless against chemical explosives. Advanced sensors ignored primitive attacks because they seemed too crude to be dangerous. Most importantly, Admiral Kethvar continued, humans demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice individual lives for strategic advantage. This concept is so alien to Devourer logic that their entire command structure collapsed when confronted with it. The chamber fell silent as aliens struggled to understand the implications. Most species valued individual life above all else. The idea of deliberately sacrificing soldiers for military objectives was almost incomprehensible to beings who had evolved beyond such brutal thinking. But it had worked. The tactic that horrified civilized minds had saved the galaxy. The hegemon himself rose to address the council. As the supreme military leader of the most powerful force in galactic civilization, his words carried enormous weight. "The humans have shown us something we had forgotten," he said in his deep, resonant voice. "We became so focused on advancing our technology that we forgot the most important lesson of warfare. The goal is to win, not to fight honorably." He looked directly at the three humans as he continued. "These beings think like warriors, not like scientists. They understand that survival sometimes requires doing things that seem wrong. They saved us all by being willing to abandon civilized principles when necessary." Ambassador Morrison stood up and bowed respectfully. "Honored Hegemon, we request permission to address the council." The request was approved immediately. The three humans walked to the central platform amid absolute silence. Every being in the chamber watched their movements with intense interest. Dr. Chen spoke first. "Honored representatives, we are grateful for your recognition of our contribution to the recent victory. However, we must address several important matters." The holographic display changed to show intelligence data that the humans had gathered during and after the battle. Star charts marked with Devourer movement patterns. Analysis of enemy communications. Projections of future threats. First, Dr. Chen continued, the Devourers we defeated were not the main force. Our analysis of their communications suggests this was a scouting expedition. The primary swarm is still in dark space, preparing for a larger invasion. The celebration in the chamber quickly turned to concerned murmurs. The beings who had thought the threat was over now realized they had only won the first battle of a much larger war. Admiral Torres stepped forward. Based on Devourer behavioral patterns, we estimate the main force will return within 50 to 100 years. They will be prepared for our tactics next time. We need to be ready with new strategies. Ambassador Morrison addressed the political implications. This brings us to our second important matter. Several council members have suggested that humanity should be granted immediate full membership in recognition of our contribution to the defense effort. Veltar nodded eagerly. The hegemony formally requests that humanity be elevated to full council membership, with a permanent seat on the Security Directorate. The motion has unanimous support from all major species. The offer was unprecedented. No species had ever been promoted from observer status to full membership so quickly. It would give humanity access to advanced technology, voting rights on all council decisions, and a voice in galactic governance. The chamber waited for the humans to accept gratefully. Instead, Ambassador Morrison politely declined. We thank the Council for this generous offer, she said calmly. However, humanity respectfully declines immediate full membership. Shocked silence filled the chamber. No species had ever refused Council membership. The benefits were enormous, and the alternative was continued isolation on the galactic periphery. Instead, Morrison continued, we propose a new classification, strategic partnership. Humanity will provide military consultation and crisis response services to the Council, but will remain politically independent. The aliens struggled to understand this proposal. Why would any species choose independence over the benefits of Council membership? Dr. Chen explained their reasoning. Humanity's greatest strength is our different perspective on problems. If we become full Council members, we will gradually adopt your ways of thinking. We will become civilized. And then we will lose the very qualities that made us useful in this crisis. Torres nodded in agreement. Council membership would give us access to advanced technology and peaceful ways of life. Within a few generations, humans would probably evolve beyond the violent thinking that saved the galaxy. We would become just another civilized species. But the universe needs someone who thinks like we do, Morrison added. Someone willing to fight dirty when necessary. Someone who can develop strategies that logical minds cannot predict. If we join the Council completely, we lose that edge. The chamber erupted in heated discussions. Some representatives were offended by the suggestion that Council membership would weaken humanity. Others were concerned about having an independent military power outside Council authority. The hegemon raised his hand for silence. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Morrison? Morrison activated the holographic display to show a detailed agreement that the humans had prepared. Strategic partnership would allow humanity to establish colonies and pursue our own development, while providing military services to the Council when needed. We would share our tactical knowledge through joint training programs, but we would not be bound by Council political decisions. You want to remain independent so you can stay dangerous, observed an Altarian representative. Exactly. Torres replied without apology. The galaxy needs someone who can think like the enemy. Someone who can develop new ways to fight when conventional methods fail. Council membership might make us too civilized for that role. The debate continued for hours. Some species worried about the precedent of allowing an independent military power. Others argued that humanity had earned the right to choose their own path. Many were simply confused by the human decision to reject the greatest honor the galaxy could offer. Finally, the vote was called. The proposal for strategic partnership passed by a narrow margin. Humanity would remain independent but allied, maintaining their unique perspective while serving as the galaxy's unconventional warfare specialists. As the session concluded, Dr. Chen made one final announcement that shocked the Council even more than their previous decisions. To prepare for the return of the main Devourer force, we propose establishing the first human war college here on Nexus Prime. We will teach alien officers the principles of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and unconventional strategy. The idea of aliens learning human military methods was both fascinating and terrifying to most council members.